Really happy with how many comments, subscriptions, likes, and views my videos are getting. I'd like to thank all of you for your support. I know I haven't been active for a while, but now I'm hoping to get back right into it. This video is actually something a subscriber suggested, so shout out to Ron Sahota, who suggested I make a video on Democratic dominance in some of the big states: California, Oregon, Washington, Illinois, and New York, and when Republicans could win those states. I expanded that a little. I included Hawaii, as you can see, and it's a great question. I've thought about it too, and these are huge things for Democrats. California has 54, New York 28, Illinois 20, Hawaii 4, Oregon, Washington combined about 20. And this is significant. It adds up to 125 electoral votes. If you're a Democrat, you just start off with 125, right? And if we include the other states like Vermont, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, Connecticut, New Jersey, Delaware, DC, Maryland, Virginia, at this point, it's becoming more of a safe state. And then but on the Republican side, you have the Dakotas, Nebraska, with the exception of the 2nd district, of course, and you have Oklahoma, Kansas, Arkansas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Tennessee, Kentucky, South Carolina, Indiana, Utah, Wyoming, Idaho, Montana. You can see there's a significant difference, and I can add some others to the list. New Mexico would go to the Democrats. Maine at large and Maine's 1st district would go to the Democrats. And there's some lean Democratic states here, like Colorado is a lean. To be honest, personally, I think Nevada's a lean too. Arizona as well. These are all. Arizona's maybe in the middle. I'll put it here. And then in the Minnesota is at the same level as Colorado. Pennsylvania and Michigan here, same as Arizona, and Wisconsin is a tilt to the Democrats. As you can see, Democrats are already up. I mean, even if we take these guys away, I'm leaving Minnesota here. I'm putting Colorado because these two usually go, and Democrats are 221. Even if you include the similar stuff for Republicans. I mean, here you'd have it in Alaska. I shouldn't have missed that. You can see even Texas. That still puts them at 161. These are all states in West Virginia. That slipped me. But a lot of these Democrats start off at an advantage. And if Republicans can flip some of these key states, just these key states, they are in a much better position coming into the election. I mean, if they Republican Party can win here, and here, they're in a great position. Now, Oregon is an interesting one. I'd like to start by talking about Oregon. But first of all, I just want to mention this. It's an interesting New York Times article. The fact is, Democrats are dominating the big city races. Republicans are having less and less of a chance. In some of these big cities, some of the largest cities like, for example, New York, in California, these big cities along the eastern seaboard, whoever wins a Democratic primary will be the mayor or will be part of the city council in most cases. It's not, the general election isn't important. For Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, once she won the primary, she won the election in a sense. The primary is more competitive than the general election in many of these cases. But I want to go to Oregon. That's an interesting one. They actually gained a seat here. And I'm going to go back to this key point. But Republicans in Oregon do quite badly. They lost the Secretary of State. They're not winning very well. They have 2 Democratic senators, a Democratic-controlled state legislature. Democrats are just dominating across the board. Now, if we look at the U.S. House, that's where I find something interesting. Oregon's 2nd district is a Republican seat, but it's huge. It's one of the bigger seats because, as you can see, it takes up at least 2/3 of the state's land is there. And since Oregon is gaining a new seat after the 2020 census, let's go right there, apportionment. So the state of Oregon is gaining one seat. This is significant because that means the Oregon state government needs to draw in another seat, right? But what does that mean? This district is very populous. It's big, and it's likely that it's quite likely that they'd split this district and add little bits of the edge districts and make that into districts, and that gives Republicans a chance to pick up another seat. Unless Oregon is so severely gerrymandered, it is unlikely that Democrats can win the new seat, because right now Oregon has 5 seats, Republicans hold 1, Democrats hold 4. But it's quite likely that Oregon could very well have 2 Republicans and 5 Democrats. 2 Republicans and 4 Democrats instead of what it currently has now. However, Oregon on the national level does not look like it's going to change. For the same reason, it's going to gain another representative. Let's look at the population data. There are some. I want to go and highlight the states which have done really well population-wise. The average is 7.4%, and the worst hit was Puerto Rico. But including only states, the worst hit was Joe Manchin's home state of West Virginia, Mississippi, and Illinois, the state of Chicago. Interestingly enough, the Rust Belt were well below the average percentage. And the vast majority of the country, if you just look at it by states, almost all of New England, Pennsylvania, the Rust Belt, parts of the Deep South, the most central of the Great Plains, and here and there New Mexico, Wyoming, and California. This is a big one because California lost a big number of its population to some of these key states. Texas, Nevada, Utah, Idaho, and North Dakota. All of these are quite nearby. But all of these had an exponential increase because lots of people from big cities to cities in states like New York, California, the Rust Belt even, left those big cities. Even in Georgia and the Eastern Seaboard, they left to move to nice rural places where they have a lower cost of living and better quality of life. Because the reason this is possible was because of coronavirus, because it created the era of remote work. And because of this, it expedited California's loss in population. This is significant because Donald Trump already started that when he reduced immigration. But this is becoming bigger, and California's population at some point is likely to drop. California, in fact, was a Republican state until the Reagan era, but it was on a trajectory to go towards the Democrats. In 1988, George H.W. Bush kept on the Republican column, but come 1992, Clinton turned the state blue. This could have happened slightly earlier because of the third-party candidate Ross Byrd, an ultra-conservative candidate who ran alongside George H.W. Bush and Bill Clinton. However, it was still to come, and right now, Democrats completely dominate the state government and their federal representation. However, this tide is slowly changing. You can see that we can see with this dispersion of Californian residents, specifically from the Bay Area and many of the liberal elite, as some might call it, areas of the state, it's showing it's leaning towards the Democratic side. As in, the levers are more likely to be Democrats than Republicans. And this does make this a more favorable environment for Republicans. Another interesting state is Washington. This is like Oregon. Democrats are doing well, their population increases, so it's not a problem. This is unlikely to go to Republicans for a long time. Hawaii, a similar story here. The only reason just barely below the U.S. percentage change, and mainly because of its high cost of living, but it's doing quite well. But an interesting one, New York. It's well below, but it's actually better than expected. Similar story as California, but the increase is much less. I think New York, at some point, would become very close to going Republican, but the key thing is New York City is so heavily Democratic that because of it, it's near impossible that the whole colossus of a state could go Republican. If we just look at voting without New York City, it's likely that the state could go 10 to 15 points to the GOP. But the key word here is the fact that New York City is part of the state, and thereby it influences how Albany's electoral votes are cast. So New York is likely to go Republican in local races heavily, excluding New York City, state council, state legislature, everything there. But it's unlikely to go that Republican on the federal level because of that one fact. Illinois is an interesting one. Quite a bit of Chicago residents, which actually is what keeps the state blue, are moving away to Texas, to the Mountain West area, Wyoming, Montana, Idaho, Utah, Nevada, Cascadia, the Dakotas, to the deep south, Georgia, Tennessee, Kentucky, Alabama, South Carolina, Virginia, North Carolina, and to even outside of the country. And Illinois actually lost people this time, and that's significant. But the key word here is the fact that Illinois is losing it in small margins. The state went to Democrats by huge margins. So even though it could very well go to a Republican in 30 or 40 years, it's unlikely it would do so anytime in the near future. Because I might just want to give you a little bit of context. Chicago is what keeps the state blue. The rest of it, especially below this line, I guess, a vague line somewhere here, is mostly farmland and rural communities, which tend to go Republican. So really, Chicago is what's keeping Illinois blue. But this is a really, really good question. And if we go back to this, I can be honest, Oregon and Washington are not going to be going to the Republicans anytime soon. Neither is Hawaii. Maybe in 60 or 70 years, but unlikely. New York, because of New York City and the population and the density, it is also unlikely. But the remaining two, California and Illinois, I personally think could go to the Republicans in the next 30 to 50 years. California, it could change. Illinois too, but just because of the vast majority of moves and life-changing decisions, partially influenced due to the pandemic, could lead people to move towards the Mountain West, which incidentally is becoming more liberal, the Deep South, and the Sun Belt. That's why I think we could really see a different dynamic come 2060, 2070, to even 2080. I thank you for watching, and please hit the subscribe button. Once again, I'd like to shout out Ron Sahoto and thank him for his comment. If you like my videos, give me a thumbs up and subscribe.